When I first heard that comment, I honestly just wanted to be like, hey, come to the ballet, like come backstage, come see our rehearsal process, come see the magic behind the scenes of it all, because it really is just one of the greatest art forms out there.
It's important to note that this isn't just exclusive to ballet and opera. We're also seeing a downturn across entertainment more generally.
Could this be the most unexpected celebrity beef of 2026? It's not Brooklyn versus the Beckhams, it's not Ashley Tisdale versus the Mum Group, it's Timothée Chalamet versus the ballet and opera communities. He was doing a bunch of interviews in the run-up to the Oscars, and in one of them he says, I quote, "I don't want to be working in ballet or opera or things where it's like, hey, keep this thing alive, even though it's like, no one cares about this anymore." And he was talking about it in the context of why he loves film so much, but it got quite a reaction, it went viral, and it did also get us thinking, does he have a point here? Do people care about ballet and opera? That's what we're going to be chatting about today. I'm Ikra, this is What in the World from the BBC World Service. Okay, so let's get into it. I've got Chelsea from the What in the World team right here with me. Hey, Chelsea.
Hey, Ikra.
Okay, so let's just get straight into it. Timothy taking shots at ballet and opera. Let's start with opera first.
Yeah.
Is the opera industry struggling?
So it seems like it might be, at least in the US, where Timothy is based. So Opera America, they're a non-profit organisation, and they gather data about opera both in the US and in Canada. And their latest data shows that audience numbers for most US performances still hasn't gone back to pre-pandemic levels. So they're still struggling to get back to getting people in seats as much as they were before COVID. We're also seeing that lots of major opera houses in the US are struggling to get bums on seats. So the New York Metropolitan Opera, that's one of the biggest opera houses in the world, they have announced a round of layoffs, pay cuts, and also they've reduced their programs. So they've reduced the number of performances that they have in a year. They've actually got the smallest number of performances in a year that they've had in 60 years, and that's because they're struggling. So their funding has actually reduced by around a third since 2022. So you could say that, at least in the US, opera does seem to be struggling right now.
Okay, so that's opera. The other side of this is ballet. That world didn't go unscathed in his comments either.
No.
What about ballet? What are things like there?
So the data for ballet is also showing a similar picture to what I talked about for opera. So there's an organisation in the US called the National Endowment for Arts, and they've shown every 5 years they do a survey of people that are going to the arts to kind of see what their opinion on the arts and culture is. And they found that there's been a reduction in people going to live ballet performances. Since 1982, there's been a reduction of about 52%. And it's not just in the US, we're also seeing that in Australia too. So in 2007, over 1 million people went to see ballet and dance performances. That, over the course of 10 years, has gone down to around 800,000, and it still hasn't returned to that million mark since the pandemic. So ballet is also seeing a downturn in audiences.
Okay, so not good news for ballet and opera at the moment, it's looking like. It sounds like they are struggling financially. Why is that?
So there's lots of reasons in the mix there. One of the main ones, though, which anyone who has gone to a ballet or opera performance might know, is the fact that it is pretty expensive to go. So I mentioned Opera America earlier. They said one of the top factors that they got from audiences when they did a survey saying, why don't you come back more often, especially when they asked people who were new to opera, was that the ticket price was too high. So depending on where you sit in the auditorium, it can differ. But sometimes even for seats that are really high up, you can be paying really expensive prices. So that can feed into making opera and ballet feel inaccessible for a lot of people. It's often been seen as kind of the reserve of the wealthy. It has a reputation of being quite exclusive. Some people refer to it as highbrow or highbrow culture, high art. And that kind of gives this impression that it's not for everyone, or some people feel that way at least. So all of that feeds into kind of making opera feel exclusive and maybe not making it feel accessible for a wide audience, which doesn't really bring in huge numbers and kind of feeds into its financial struggles sometimes. But another factor is the financial model, or rather the funding model for opera and ballet. So this goes back to when ballet started, if we take that as the main example, like in the 1400s in Europe, in the Renaissance period. Ballet was mainly funded by the royal court, and that was a system called patronage. So nobles and the upper classes of the time would fund ballet because it was a relatively new art form then, and get ballerinas to come and perform to their courtiers for these big fancy parties. So it was like a kind of show-off thing, you know, like come into the court to my huge glamorous party and I'm going to show you this new art form that you've never heard of before. It was a way to impress people. But you still hear about patrons today. If you go to the opera or to see a ballet performance, often you'll see kind of the names of patrons etched into the wall, and they're the huge donors that keep opera houses and ballet performances going. So in the US, for example, if you look at the portion of income, so how opera is funded, box office revenue, so that's the amount of money that they're making from the sale of tickets, was around 22% for 2024. The amount that they were getting from private donors was around over half their income for that year. So that really shows the big role that donors play. And also you're getting funding from the government. So when there's economic downturns, when that funding is cut off, it means that it's hard for opera and ballet to adapt because they can't really rely as much on audience income. But it's important to note that this isn't just exclusive to ballet and opera. We're also seeing a downturn across entertainment more generally. So if we talk about cinema, seeing as that's what Timothy is working in, we back in 2024, we saw a downturn in people buying tickets to the cinema of about 8.8%, according to the European Audiovisual Observatory. And we're also seeing a downturn in huge markets across the world. So in China, for example, there was a downturn of 22% in audiences going to the cinema. So this is not just exclusive to opera and ballet, it's happening across the entertainment industry.
But there's the other side to this where, you know, people are reacting, commenting on social, it's gone mega viral and saying ballet and opera are alive and kicking. They're very well, thank you, Timothée Chalamet. What have you seen about that?
Yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of that too. I even saw one opera house was giving its audiences a discount just in the name of Timothée's comments over the weekend.
Making the most of it.
Making the most of it, exactly. A lot of people are using it as a way of getting more promo for their current programs or performances that are on at the moment. But even before Timothée said this about ballet and opera, I was seeing a lot of discussion on social media about classical music and opera especially because of Rosalia's new album, Lux. So her album before this one was very kind of reggaeton inspired. It has a lot of elements, but people were really surprised by this new album because it's a complete left turn from that. So she worked with the London Symphony Orchestra, and she sings in a very kind of operatic style in more than around 13 languages, I think. So it's not exactly screaming, accessible pop hits, kind of top 40. However, it got to number 7 on the global Spotify chart, and the BBC spoke to TikTok about the amount of kind of views that those videos using big songs from the album like La Perla and Berghain were getting. And they got around 3 billion views. That was back in November last year when it was released. So classical music is getting interest from a range of audiences, especially young ones, people that are listening to Rosalia at least. So ballet is also seeing a bit of a resurgence, especially in countries like South Korea. So data from the Korea Performing Arts Box Office Information System saw a 49.6% increase in people going to ballet performances. And they were also seeing an uptick in people going to other events related to ballet, so ones for kind of amateur performers. And they think that this is linked to the ballet core trend in fashion. So we've seen recently there's a lot of different fashion houses releasing collections inspired by ballet. So I don't know if you've seen Kim Kardashian's Skims collection. It has Lisa from Blackpink in it, very inspired by ballet. We've also seen, I think, Adidas and Puma. They've released kind of ballet-style flats. So ballet is having a big moment, at least in the fashion world, and that's bleeding into making people more curious about going to performances. And so I think we're seeing kind of, because ballet is getting more popular in pop culture, and opera too, for example, Rosalia, more people are taking an interest in it and they want to go and experience it for themselves.
I'm loving that idea of people going to the ballet for a night out. Okay, and we've been reaching out to people who love opera and ballet, so let's have a listen.
When I first heard that comment, I honestly just wanted to be like, hey, come to the ballet, like come backstage, come see our rehearsal process, come see the magic behind the scenes of it all, because it really is just one of the greatest art forms out there. Being in the art form, I know exactly how much we put into our work every day. I do think it is still relevant today, especially in our times. Times are difficult right now, and there's a lot happening in this world. And sometimes just, go to a ballet, go to an opera.
As somebody who studies and works in the classical music industry, I find his comments ridiculous. Opera and ballet have set up the foundation for modern musical arts. They're timeless, productions are put on every single year. I made a video about this topic because I was so affected by it, and I got hundreds of comments from classical musicians who are outraged. It's comments such as this that remind me why the arts need so much more backing than they get.
I don't believe they're dying art forms. I think they're evolving art forms. I think in order for art to stay relevant, we have to constantly evolve, the same as film does. I believe that ballet and opera are two phenomenal art forms, and I'm not just saying that because I work in ballet and closely to opera, but because they're live art forms. They're active, they're breathing, they're living, and they require humans who feel passionately enough about them to tell those stories. And we want audiences to come and to see those stories, and audiences are hungry to come and see the stories.
Okay, let's pause there because Chelsea, I know that you have done ballet for a long time.
I have.
It requires a lot of work, right?
Yeah, so I started ballet when I was 4, and I've done it pretty much continuously throughout my life, even though I kind of took a short break around in my early 20s. But even though I've been doing it from that young age, it takes so much work to get to professional level. It takes a huge toll on your body. Most professional ballerinas tend to retire around in their 30s, maybe early 40s if they really have a lot of stamina. It depends on your ability because, of course, you can get injuries. But it's a highly skilled profession, and you're doing it day in, day out. It takes a huge toll. And opera as well. I mean, if you've been to an opera or heard opera, I can't believe that the human body can make that sound or project that far. So this is a highly skilled profession, and that's not to mention the people backstage as well, the stagehands, people that go work on the costumes, the orchestra that perform every evening. So some people argue that because of all the talent that's on the stage, all the long years of hard work that goes into reaching that level, that kind of justifies the high price of opera and ballet because they are so difficult to execute. So if you compare it to theatre, for example, if you've got a short running performance with really big stars, for example, it can reach in the hundreds of dollars. So we're seeing across the industry, not just in ballet and opera, really expensive prices that often price people out, and efforts also being made within the industry to combat that and make it accessible for a wider audience.
Okay, so opera and ballet still have fans, they're still drawing in audiences, but as you said, they're getting a bit of a reputation sometimes for being a bit inaccessible. What's being done to change that, though?
There were people saying, actually, Timothy has a point. We do need to be doing more to make opera accessible for people because the survival of this art form depends on that. So there are quite a few schemes trying to make opera more affordable for fans. The Opéra Comique in Paris, for example, has a 35% discount for under 35, so they're trying to get more young people in. There's also a lot of effort to kind of change perceptions of ballet. I mentioned earlier, people kind of seeing it as the reserve of the wealthy because the tickets are so expensive in so many cases. Misty Copeland, she was the former principal dancer for the American Ballet Theatre. She's actually founded a organization that tries to get people from disadvantaged backgrounds, young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, and also people from minority ethnic backgrounds into ballet, because introducing people to it younger kind of fights that perception that it's not for everyone. And there's also other kind of schemes like the Opera Vision platform that's across Europe. They broadcast opera performances for free online. So if you can't afford to go to a performance or you don't really want to commit to it yet, you want to see what it's like, you can watch opera on their platforms, and they've been doing that since 2015. So there are schemes out there and programs that are trying to make it more accessible for people.
So do you think ballet and opera could have a bit of resurgence in future? Could it have a whole new lease of life, really?
People often say that ballet is the foundational kind of art form for a lot of modern dance forms that we see now. Opera, we're seeing as inspiring artists today, like Rosalia. So it seems like ballet and opera are going to continue to inspire and influence a lot of the modern art forms and music and culture that we see today, even if they aren't popular like they were in Renaissance times, they're still having a huge influence on culture that we enjoy nowadays.
And I don't know about you, Chelsea, but I'm interested to see if this comes full circle with Timothée Chalamet.
Oh.
Maybe he's going to be a ballet dancer in his next film.
I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe this is a setup.
Yeah,
maybe he's actually
maybe.
planning ahead.
Maybe
I
it's
wouldn't
got
be
him
surprised.
thinking.
Yeah.
All he needs to do is watch this episode. Anyway, thank you so much, Chelsea.
Thank you, Ikra.
Thank you for listening. Remember, you guys can DM us on Instagram at any time at BBC What in the World over there. But for now, I'm Ikra. This is What in the World from the BBC World Service, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Okay, Chelsea, I'm going to come watch you in the ballet one day.
No, I've been doing it all my life, Ikra, but I'm not Royal Opera House level yet.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm getting there.
I think
either.
you're being shy.
No, I'm not being humble. If I was a ballet dancer, I would not be humble about that. I would be bragging. I'm not at that level, sadly.